Be talking about a lot of fun things today. So it is 12 o'clock on the nose. I'm just going to give it a minute before I get started. Thanks for being here. Okay, well, welcome to the Trump 2.0 Tuesday updates with Rosanna Berardi. I'm Rosanna Berardi. Thanks for joining today. Lots of things going on in the immigration world. We're going to go over a couple big ones just so you can stay informed and be the smartest person at your dinner table. If you're interested in more detailed info, be sure to scan the QR code for my Immigration Weekly podcast. I take a deeper dive into most of these issues, and they're pretty fascinating, even if you're not a legal eagle like me. So today we're going to start with the one big beautiful bill. Now, if you know me, you know I've been complaining forever that Congress doesn't do anything. And I'm always saying, where is Congress? Where is Congress? Where is Congress? Well, lo and behold, Congress did something. Whether it's good or bad remains to be seen. But the one big beautiful bill was signed by President Trump on July 4th, and it is packed with tons and tons of stuff. But today I just wanted to talk about the immigration provisions that were included in the one big beautiful bill. Now, unfortunately, Congress didn't do two things at once. They did not reform the immigration law under this bill. Now, just remember, the U.S. immigration law has not been meaningfully changed since 1996. So we're dealing with a really outdated, clunky immigration law. Wasn't changed under this one big beautiful bill. However, there were a ton of immigration provisions. And basically, the long and short of it is the government has given ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, a ton of money, billions and billions and billions of dollars. Massive funding for ICE, over 100 billion with a B, was allocated to the agency through 2029, which is only 4 years. That's a lot of money over a 4-year period. And with this funding, it will make ICE the largest federal law enforcement agency. So what does that tell you? That tells you that the administration is not backing down on immigration. They're keeping it at the forefront. They're spending $30 billion just on hiring, training, technology upgrades. ICE is going to have a lot of people, a lot of boots on the ground, and they will be doing their jobs as Congress allowed them to. They did expand some of the deportation powers of the ICE officers. Now, this isn't really changing the fundamental concept. There's a concept under the immigration law that dates back to 1996 called expedited removal. And expedited removal can be done at the U.S. border crossings. It's done at the local bridges here in Buffalo every day. When I was an officer there, we did a ton of them. And it's basically if somebody commits fraud or misrepresentation at the port of entry, you can be what's called expeditedly removed. And what does that mean? It means that you're banned from the United States, depending on the basis, but for fraud and misrepresentation, it's a lifetime ban. For other reasons, could be a 5-year ban that you have to remain out of the US. But the issue with this expedited removal, and the reason that it's controversial, is that the applicant for admission does not get due process. There is no provision for he or she stay in court. Expedited removal gives the government broad sweeping powers to remove people without the layers and layers of the judicial process. Why is this a big deal? Well, this was a big deal back in 1996 when it came out. I've been in the industry that long that I remember the day we were all like, what is this expedited removal thing? Well, the government's been using that for the better part of 30 years. But under the One Big Beautiful Bill, it really expanded the expedited removal powers. So expedited removal is going to be much more common. It could affect people that have overstayed their visas, entered without inspection or unlawfully. Government really has to have solid proof. We've actually recently been successful in overturning an expedited removal order at one of the borders. Kudos to our lawyer, Zach Alstrom, for the great work on that file. But this is going to be something that we're going to see. Again, not brand new. We need to take all of this immigration stuff with a grain of salt, because for us practitioners that have been doing this for decades, we're used to this. We see it. It just wasn't on the national news the way it is today. But the Big Beautiful Bill did expand those powers, so we are going to be seeing more expedited removal. What else did it do? It also, remember the wall, build the wall? I thought we were done with that, but I guess we're not, because it allocated $46.5 billion for the border wall construction, and another $45 billion to build new detention centers. So, I mean, there's a huge problem in detention facilities. There's more people than there is space. One would argue that this is needed. But it's a whole lot of money that, in my humble opinion, could be better spent elsewhere. But the One Big Beautiful Bill gave a lot of money to ICE, expanded their powers. They're going to be a bigger, better, controversially, maybe better law enforcement agency. So if anyone asks you about One Big Beautiful Bill and immigration, really hasn't changed the law fundamentally. Of course, there are some fee increases involved with this legislation. If you are applying for a visa abroad at any of the U.S. embassies or consulates worldwide, there will be a new visa fee of $250. The government says that will go into effect in 2026. And then more importantly, the I-94 card, which all work permit holders receive, either the actual card, which is a small white card, or a stamp in their passport that says you're a TN or an L1 or what have you, that card forever and a day has cost $6. Under the One Big Beautiful Bill, it will now cost $24. Now, I laugh when I hear that number because, some government pinhead did a calculation of how much it should cost. And rather than land on 25 or 30, we're at 24. So, I mean, that's a substantial increase from $6. We don't have the effective date on that one, but more or less the government, bigger, bloated, ICE is huge, and it's going to be a little bit more expensive to come to the United States. There's also a lot of fee increases for asylum applications, as well as individuals that are awaiting the asylum process. So that is the One Big Beautiful Bill and its impact on immigration law. So now we're going to shift over to the Supreme Court decision, Trump versus CASA. I've talked about this endlessly on YouTube. I've did two whole podcasts on the issue, but I wanted you to walk away again to be the smartest person at your dinner table. For when someone says, hey, the Supreme Court got rid of birthright citizenship, that's not actually true. So what the Supreme Court did on their very last day of their term this year, they are all on summer recess, will not reconvene until October, is they looked at the procedural issues underlying this birthright citizenship claim. What does that mean? I'm not going to get too nerdy or too technical here, but in the US, there's about 700 federal judges across the United States, and lawyers are clever. On the first day of the Trump administration, he signed an executive order banning birthright citizenship. It's in the Constitution, not really the place for an executive order, but be that as it may, the minute it came out, tons and tons of lawyers started filing lawsuits saying this is unconstitutional, this needs a constitutional amendment. All these lawyers filed in various federal courts. Now, lawyers are smart people. They're going to go to courts that they think are going to favorably rule on their claim. And guess what? 22 states filed and said, we don't like this. And guess what? A large number of federal court judges said, we don't like this either, in various jurisdictions. But the issue here is, does the federal judge in Oregon have power to stop something on a national level? The Trump administration, as well as Obama and Bush and all the administrations, have been complaining about the power of the federal judges. And the government's argument was like, look, if a federal judge doesn't like it, then his decision or her decision should be limited to their jurisdiction, not the entire United States. And guess what? The Supreme Court said yes. Not surprising. I mean, when you think about it, you think about the hierarchy of government. The president is the top official at the executive branch, shouldn't be making laws. That's Congress's job. But nonetheless, we have this abundance of executive orders. Are we really going to put the hands of the law? Are we going to put the law of the United States in the hands of 700 federal district court judges? And the Supreme Court said, no, this is not what the founding fathers intended. So what's going to happen now on birthright citizenship? Well, there's a lot of legal maneuvering. The court, as of that date at the end of June, gave everyone 30 days for this to shake out. And what's happening now is a lot of those states, the 22 states, are now filing class action lawsuits, will be treated differently. This case is probably going to go back up to the Supreme Court eventually, but today they haven't made a decision on the merits of birthright citizenship. This was really procedural, in my opinion, a huge issue because it really speaks on the power of the federal courts versus the executive branch. So we're going to watch this one. The court doesn't reconvene until October. They don't take every case. There's something called certiorari, a nice law term flashback, which is the court looks at big constitutional issues. That's why when people say, I'm going to take this to the Supreme Court, no, you're not. They're not going to review it unless it contains a burning constitutional issue. And that's why they heard this one on emergency appeal back in June, and we're going to continue to monitor it. So that is birthright citizenship in a nutshell. Next topic, this one, wow, I've been doing this for almost 30 years. Can't say I've ever seen a memo like this. June 11th, it came out. The Department of Justice issued a memo to all of its employees. US DOJ said, hey, we're asking the civil division to use all available resources to prioritize and pursue denaturalization cases. What does that mean? For someone to naturalize, that means they were not born in the United States. They have come over either on a work permit or a green card, and then they petition the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services to become a naturalized U.S. citizen. Perfect example of that, my husband. He was born in Italy. He came to the U.S. when he was 4. He had a green card for a long time. He then applied for U.S. citizenship. He received it. He now has a U.S. passport. He can vote in our election. There are tons and tons and tons of naturalization cases each and every year. We do a ton of them here at the firm. What is the government saying now? Are naturalized citizens going to have their citizenship removed? Don't lose sleep over this one. It's just the fact that this memo came out and is saying to the civil division of the DOJ, hey, look, we want you to look at these cases and see if there was any fraud committed, any terrorist activity. Now, here's the deal. The U.S. statute in the U.S. Code has clearly laid out that the government can denaturalize somebody that was involved in terrorism, war criminals, human rights abusers, gang members, felons. Most people don't have an issue with that. The part that concerns me in looking at this memo is it says people involved in financial crimes, Medicare or Medicaid fraud, or sex offenses, including the government laid out PPP. Remember the PPP loans during COVID? People are saying if you committed fraud and received your naturalization and didn't fess up to that, they can take away your U.S. citizenship. Now, they cannot go back. They can't go and say, "Oh, you committed fraud today. We're going to take away your naturalization." That's not how it happens. They could look at applications and see if any fraud was committed, and then move to denaturalize you. Again, one of my colleagues said to me when this administration started, "Rosanna, the immigration house is on fire and we're worried about the curtains." And to me, this push for denaturalization personally is worrying about the curtains. Naturalized US citizens are not the problem in our immigration system. They just aren't. Never have been, probably will never be. Are there some bad actors? Of course, there's always bad actors. Are we really going to spend government time and energy and resources trying to denaturalize people? The other thing I don't like about this memo, they are going to do it from a civil perspective. What does that mean? Well, remember, we have two paths for lawsuits and litigation in the US, criminal and civil. The criminal standard of proof is beyond a reasonable doubt. If you've watched Dateline or any court TV, you know beyond a reasonable doubt. Pretty hard to prove. The burden of proof, legal burden of proof for a civil litigation and lawsuit is clear and convincing evidence, much lower standard. And so in looking at this, a lot of lawyers and legal analysts are saying, they're going after these civilly. It'll be easier for them. Again, do not lose sleep if you are a naturalized citizen. This is unlikely to apply to you. It's just concerning that they took the time and the energy to roll this out, and we'll see what shakes out. I'm not sure. This could be a scare tactic. Who knows? But again, naturalized citizens, not usually the problem. The problem is the outdated immigration law that doesn't properly reflect the US labor market's needs. But I digress. Our final topic today, we like to keep this one front and center because it's that time of the year for student visas. And again, we're worried about the curtains in the burning down house. International students have been targeted by this administration for a while. They were canceling their student status over really silly things like speeding tickets. Thank God that stopped. That was in about April of this year. They also said, we're shutting down student visa appointments worldwide. Well, it's July. Most colleges or universities start next month. And that was a huge problem because in order to enter the US as an international student, you have to get a visa in your passport at a US embassy or consulate worldwide. Now, this doesn't apply to Canadians. Canadians can enter with just their passport. But for the rest of the world, they need to be accepted by a school, show they can pay cash for it, no financial aid or loans available, and they need to go to their local consulate or embassy and get that visa. The Trump administration shut down those visa appointments. As of June 18th, they restarted them and said, okay, students, you can apply. But there's a condition. All your social media accounts have to be made public. And when you are applying for your visa, the Department of State consular officers, these poor people, like they don't have enough to do, are going to have to be checking student social media. So if you're applying for a student visa, you can't mark your accounts private. They have to be public, and they really don't want you to start deleting or taking things down. The officers are looking for anti-American rhetoric or posts or anti-Semitic posts or any post related to violence, terrorist, or militia groups. Now, everyone's going to say to me, First Amendment, free speech. They can't do this. They can do this. If you're not physically present in the United States, you do not have a right to free speech. That's how our Constitution works. If you don't like it, it's a constitutional issue. However, why am I saying this? It's time to apply for student visas. The appointments are still very hard to get. You have to be really careful about social media. And, I was interviewed by a pretty high-level media source last week about social media and what do you recommend? Because in our community here in Buffalo, New York, a gentleman was arrested and prosecuted by the federal government because he said on X that he wanted to put a bullet through the head of an ICE officer and his family members. Terrible thing to say. Government arrested him. No First Amendment rights. He was not physically present in the US. However, the reporter said to me, what are your best practices? Best practices for anything pertaining to social media in life as well as immigration is save your hostile comments for your friends or family. Like, don't put it in writing. Don't put it in social media. If you don't like the Trump administration, that's fine. If you really need to spout on X or Facebook or Instagram or whatever, I know it's silly. You should be able to say what you want, but remember, no First Amendment protections if you're not in the United States. So this is tricky. The takeaway from the student visa stuff, social media must be marked public. It's going to take longer and it's going to be harder. And it's going to take these officers way more time to make determinations whether you're admissible or not. So those are our issues today. Thank you for joining us. The one big beautiful bill, immigration provisions, way more money. We've got the Supreme Court decision that really wasn't the decision on birthright citizenship, really talked about injunctions and the power gap between the executive branch and procedural issues. We've got denaturalization memos going on. Again, please don't lose sleep about it, but it was something peculiar that we haven't seen. And finally, the student visa issues. They take a long time. Please be careful when you're applying and writing things on social media. So I'm Rosanna Berardi. The second Tuesday of every month, I do Trump 2.0 Tuesday updates. I also do a weekly podcast, Immigration Weekly with Rosanna Berardi, where I do a deep dive in some of these issues. But I pride myself. My episodes are not any longer than 20 minutes. No need to listen to a lawyer go on and on. No one likes that. So thanks for joining. We hope to see you next time. We are having another webinar on July 31st that's going to talk about immigration options for Canadian citizens. So be sure to mark your calendars on that one. And I will see you next month. Thank you.